Welcome into the show. I'm Dan McLaughlin. My guest tonight is someone that you know quite well. I'll visit with sports director of Fox 2, a great talent, great friend, and that's Martin Kilcoyne. A St. Louis native, Martin has been at Fox 2 for many, many years, and you can find him nightly delivering the sports, delivering a quick line or two to make you laugh or make you even think, and you can listen to him on his radio show or podcast work throughout town. Never short on information and opinion, he's one of the best sports directors that this town has ever seen. There's so many subjects I want to get into with Martin, from the NFL lawsuit settlement to the lockout in Major League Baseball, and who are his favorite players to cover and best sports moments he's had a chance to be a part of. Let's get into all that and bring in Martin Kilcoyne of Fox 2. Marty, as always, great to see you, and thanks for doing this.
Dan, I feel like, am I being deposed? Is that what's taking place? Great to be here. I get to see the Scoops empire play out every Sunday on the TV in the Fox 2 offices, and now to be a part of it's beyond a dream, Dan.
So let's add to that dream right here. How did that dream of broadcasting start for you, and is it a dream to do this?
I think for like a lot of kids that growing up in St. Louis, I wanted to be Jack Buck. I wanted to call Cardinal games. I wanted to be on the radio. And then after a while, I kind of got into writing. When I was in high school at CBC, I was the editor of the paper, and I went to Marquette up in Milwaukee, and I said, okay, I like writing, but it's kind of more fun if you could write and then also turn that into broadcasting. So I did some college radio, some college TV. But I think like a lot of TV guys, I was a frustrated play-by-play guy. I was like, I'll eventually get to that. But as you know, it doesn't always work out that way. So I think at a young age, I liked sports. I wanted to cover sports. I was terrible at sports. I always say that, CBC decided my broadcasting career when I realized after 2 years of basketball, I wasn't going anywhere. I played 1 year of football and I gave up on that. And they said, no, you should stick with it. You're kind of a big kid. And I said, no, I'm gonna play 4 years of basketball. And they said, you're probably not. So I think the fact that I was terrible at sports led to covering sports. But I think initially it was wanting to be Jack Buck.
You went to CBC High School. Mike Shannon went to CBC. That connection, what has that been like for you over the years with Mike?
I think when I first moved back to St. Louis, because I had jobs in Flagstaff, Arizona, Rhinelander, Wisconsin, Madison, Wisconsin, and then in the summer of '97, I'm back in St. Louis, and there's Mike Shannon, who I grew up listening to, and I was around a little bit when I had interned at Channel 11 one summer, but then now I'm here covering sports in my hometown. But over the years now, I've gotten to know him pretty well. He's been great to me. And one of the stories I told when he was retiring last summer is I said, you have to understand Mike, because he lives in his own world, and everything works out for Mike. So one year at the CBC night at the races, he would have everybody over to Fairmount Park. They asked me if I would help him do the auction. I'm like, Mike Shannon does not need my help, okay? He doesn't need anybody's help. But they said, just be ready to help. So I'm up there, auctioning off a year of car washes, and nobody's bidding, and it's like, it's dying. Mike comes up, grabs the microphone. All right, who's here? Who wants to go fishing with me? People start bidding like thousands of dollars. And he looks around the room. He's like, where's Red at? Red's going fishing too. So now people are all raising their hands. He keeps going. He says, where's Whitey at? Whitey heard it. He goes, why do you fish? He's going fishing. Sure he is. Now people, we're talking like $10,000, $15,000. He's going around, who else is here? Where's Stan at? Stan's here. He's got a fishing trip. Stan Musial, Whitey Herzog, Red Shane and him. He gets like 25 grand, hands me a mic and goes, here you go. And I'm like, okay, about those car washes, he'll give me $100. He just killed the room, owned it, and I'm like, that's Mike. He just gets it done, and he does it his way, and it was beautiful to see. I couldn't answer that after. I was like, maybe we should just shut the auction down at that point.
And that's what makes this business so much fun. There's moments like that. How about for you? What's been the best moment you have covered?
When you go and talk to kids, and I know you do it a lot too, high schools or people that are in journalism, and they'll ask you those kind of questions. For me, it's Game 7 of the NLCS at Shea Stadium when the Cardinals beat the Mets. And it wasn't the World Series. It wasn't the Super Bowl. I'd have to do a La Russa tied for first because this has always been my answer, although I'll put the Stanley Cup now tied for first because of everything that went into that for the Blues organization. But my favorite game, like the Blues, I'll say was my favorite moment when they won the Cup. But that game against the Mets, because you had so many different layers to it. Scott Rowland is feuding with La Russa. We all know it. They're not getting along. Well, Rowland's about to hit a home run to be the hero. But Andy Chavez makes the catch at the wall, and the only reason Chavez is even in there is because Cliff Floyd, who wouldn't have made that catch, rolled his ankle running to first. So I'm thinking, wow, this is unbelievable. Rowland was going to be the hero, but he gets denied. They're going to lose a game. All of New York is going crazy. Shea Stadium is shaking. The building's insane. Molina hits the home run. Yadier Molina, this is before he became a really well-known clutch player, hits the home run in the top of the ninth. Now we're in the bowels of Shea Stadium because the game was on Fox. We're getting ready to do post-game coverage, and we're in this little tunnel. You can't see much because it kind of went down and up. You can just see home plate. So I see Beltran, and I literally saw the curveball drop from this little tunnel, and all the New York cops are there, and as soon as they started getting runners on, the champagne had already gone to the Cardinal clubhouse. And all of a sudden, the New York cops are going, bring the champagne back, bring it back, because they think the Mets are going to win it. I see that curveball drop. We run out onto the field. I get an interview with Adam Wainwright, and I said, what were you thinking? A young guy, big moment. And he said, honestly, all I was thinking was, don't face Beltran. He said, my only thought was don't get to Beltran, and lo and behold, he did. That game to me is still my number one game by far.
It was incredible in 06. Now let's go on the flip side. What's the worst sports moment for you?
It's probably the vote, probably when the Rams left St. Louis. I mean, we covered the Rams. We did a ton of games on Fox 2. I wasn't like emotionally attached, like growing up with the Cardinals and the Blues. It wasn't that kind of emotional attachment. But even at that time, I knew it had been handled wrong. I think just for the city and for all the football fans, I know you had talked about it. Your son cried about it. I think there are probably a lot of kids in St. Louis who were devastated, more so than the adults, And so that moment being in Houston, and I also you just felt like there was this rigged system and you're just watching it happen and there's nothing you could do. That moment for what it did to the city and just kind of the idea that St. Louis wasn't good enough, that really just ticked me off.
Well, it ticked off so many St. Louisans, and we'll talk about that next. The Rams leaving town and the lawsuit that has been settled. That's next on Scoops with Danny Mac here on Fox 2. Scoops with Danny Mac on Fox 2 is brought to you by Schnucks, Ryan Kelly, the home loan expert, Lou Fuse, Triad Bank, Lordo's Diamonds, your family's jeweler for life, and the Missouri Athletic Club, 2 clubhouses, 1 platinum club. Welcome back to the show on Fox 2. Now, before the break, we were talking about the Rams relocation lawsuit, a lawsuit that now has been settled to the tune of $790 million. And let's bring back in Martin Kilcoyne. Martin, what did you think of this settlement?
I honestly thought it was a good deal, and I got mocked immediately on Twitter for saying so. I think these lawyers did a great job. When this lawsuit initially was started, I was among the group of people who thought this is going to go nowhere. And if somebody had said back then, you could get $50 million, I would have been like doing cartwheels saying, good for you. Obviously, since then, they dug in. They started turning over some key pieces of evidence. And if you did follow it closely, there were a lot of things that were exposed about how they did business. And I realized the whole country wasn't paying attention up until the very end. I was among those disappointed. I wanted a trial. I wanted that theater. I wanted to see these guys squirm in the witness stand. I think that would have been awesome. But I think in the way it works, you talk to all the legal pundits, they say it's risky to go to trial. Doesn't matter if it's a Missouri, jury or not. It's a risky proposition. You get that kind of money, and I know it's only $500 when you pay all the lawyers. It's still a check for $800 that they have to write. And now who writes the check? Well, the league, I was told, they're going to pay it, and then they're going to have an owners meeting and say, okay, how are we going to settle this? How much does Stan pay? How much do we pay? That's a pretty awkward conversation because they're not really happy with him. Shockingly, Dan, I've been told Jerry Jones is leading the charge saying, we got to help Stan. He did all that Los Angeles work. We got to help him out. So the fact that they're kind of mad at each other, there's some value to that. And $790 million it's a big number. I mean, I think it's second only to the concussion settlement in terms of checks that the league has had to write.
So now we don't have football, but we do have soccer coming. MLS, we've got the Blues, we've got the St. Louis Cardinals. Where do you think we are as a city in the landscape of sports nationally? How are we perceived?
Well, I think if you look at Indianapolis, Cincinnati, Nashville right now, these are two sport towns that are adding an MLS. In Nashville, Cincinnati's added MLS. So the traditional sports, it was always two, and now they're going to MLS. We're keeping pace because Indianapolis has NBA and NFL. Kansas City has MLB, NFL. Cincinnati, MLB, NFL. You start going around, and St. Louis has the Blues and the Cardinals. So you're really, in terms of cities in your region, you're kind of on par in terms of sports franchises. I think the soccer, if people haven't driven around downtown, just drive around that building going up and just the edges of Union Station. It's changing the landscape of that whole area because you could always go from the Arch to Keener Plaza and you've got Bush, Enterprise, and then kind of slowed down before you got to Harris Stowe and then Slough. That whole area there is exploding with that soccer stadium. I didn't grow up wearing Sambas. I didn't have a mullet, even though I liked Don Ebert and the Steamers, but I wasn't a soccer kid growing up. I think it's fantastic. I think, and you know it in this town, the people that are so wound up and buying tickets, that can't get here soon enough. So I think we're right on par. New York, LA, of course. Chicago are going to have more teams. They're going to have, it's just always going to be that way, but I think we're right where we should be. If we didn't have the soccer, I think I'd feel a little left out. But that's an emerging league, there's no doubt.
Martin, hang tight. Coming up, baseball is on hold. What does that mean for the St. Louis Cardinals and their fans? That's next on Fox 2. Scoops with Danny Mac on Fox 2 is presented by the Ascension Charity Classic, Stratum Structural Systems, Royal Banks of Missouri, Hair Saloon for Men, and Family Golf and Learning Center. Play your best. Welcome back to the show. Now, Wednesday night, Major League Baseball went into lockout mode. Not what you want to hear, as the business side of the sport has been put on hold. And we bring back in Martin Kilcoyne, sports director at Fox 2. Marty, what do you think of this lockout? Are you concerned at all? And what do you think it does right now for the sport?
I think if players and owners are ever going to get in agreement, not only on like the collective bargaining agreement, but just that what's good for the game, now is the time. I think baseball's got to look around the room and say we can't screw it up anymore. The fans know that we're not going to get along. They know this is going to get dragged out. Let's surprise them and sort of work it out, which probably won't happen. But there's got to be a way for them to say, if we screw this up, we're going to get less and less popular. And you're already at a time where the other sports are on the rise, and you can't afford, if you're baseball, to take a step back.
Well, even though it's really early in the process of this, do you think it has turned fans off where they say, you know what, just the heck with this, I'm done?
I think they're confused because you had the flurry of activity, and Max Scherzer gets $43 million a year, and then you hear there's a lockout. What's it over? Well, there's the way they spend the money. And people are saying, well, they're spending money. And I get it. Those are the high-end guys who are getting paid. I don't know if people are turned off yet. I think they will be. And I think these next couple of months, if you get to spring training, we have, the old video of like a giant padlock. I don't know if anybody makes those locks anymore, but it used to be you'd go to the stadium and it would have a giant lock on it. If we have that kind of visual again, that would be damaging.
All right, let's switch gears. Let's go around the board here, have a little fun with you. You've had a long, great run at Fox 2. It continues today. So who is the best athlete you've covered in St. Louis and why?
Ooh, boy, that's a tough one. I hate to always quote LaRusso, it tied for first, but I think the best athlete, and I was around him a lot, is probably Marshall Faulk, because I think he could have played baseball. I think he could probably, and I know he's a great golfer now, but it amazed me because Marshall would score 4 or 5 touchdowns on a Sunday. And then we did his show on Sunday nights at Fox 2. And he would walk in, 5 minutes before the show with a bag of McDonald's and like 4 cheeseburgers. I said, what are you doing? He's like, did you score 4 touchdowns today? And I said, no, but I mean, he just had this, he wasn't a workout warrior. His brain and his body like connected so well. I think he was the best athlete. I think the athlete with the most flair was Brett Hull. And I wasn't here very long with Brett, but he was the best guy to put the microphone in front of after a game, for sure.
All right. How about the toughest athlete to cover and why?
Mark McGwire, to be honest, because there was the media crush. I was a younger guy then, back in '98, and I was in the locker room a lot. That was part of my job, was as more of a reporter than an anchor. And the demand from the newsroom was like, hey, will McGwire talk about this today? Will he talk about this topic? And I get it from his end. It was probably exhausting, and it wasn't part of the job that he liked. But I think he could have handled it better, and I think he would probably say that now. I mean, it was weird because it wasn't just the team. It really had become all about him, and I think that did make him uncomfortable.
All right, give me the one sporting event that you look forward to covering here in town.
Well, I think we've been spoiled, and it's become almost annual. But when the Cardinals are in the playoffs, it's October. It's like the best month to take some time off and golf in October, or go with your family, or maybe the kids are on a camping trip. But all of that gets put on hold every year. I can't make vacation plans because we always say in October, Cardinals could be playing. There's nothing like going down there and, getting in your car, you're driving down, especially like a day game in October, heading down to Busch Stadium, and everybody sort of just takes the day off and goes to wears their Cardinal red. The playoff baseball to me is, I look forward to it every year, and if they don't make it, I'm among those disappointed.
So let's advance the story here. 2021, it's almost done. And as we look ahead to 2022, what do you think the biggest storyline in sports is here locally? MLS, Vladimir Tarasenko, what the Cardinals may look like next year. What's the biggest storyline for you?
I think it's the Cardinals because it's the final year for Wainwright and Molina. People might get a little tired of the topic. Some folks probably can't get enough. But I think knowing that it's the last year for the two of them, as good as they've been, as good of friends as they are. I mean, it was great seeing Wainwright's pictures Thanksgiving in Puerto Rico, hanging with Molina. And I think the fact it's not just their farewell, but what do the Cardinals do with it? Do they make the most of it? Do you send those two out with a 86-win season and missing out? That'd be terrible. I think the pressure's on Bill DeWitt and John Mozeliak to have a winning team, to have enough pieces that it's not just sneak in, but to really have a World Series contending team. I think that's sort of maybe the expectation even from Wainwright and Molina, that they're going to come back for one more run at winning it all. To me, that's the biggest story in 2022. Can they deliver in the final year for those guys?
I mean this sincerely. You've done such a great job during COVID, just getting through this, covering sports. What did you learn about trying to cover sports when you can't get to the athletes, and then trying to find a silver lining here? And how did you, try to make it improve going forward? So what did you learn?
I think what I learned during COVID is that storytelling should never die in sports, because we get so used to game highlights, and here's the triple, and here's the touchdown. And when there were no games, there were no highlights. At Fox 2, they wanted sports in there because it was so heavy. All the news was negative, and it was depressing. And sports, they were hoping, would have something to kind of make us laugh or just a lighter note. So I was thinking, why did we like Sports Illustrated when we were a kid? It wasn't from the night before. It may have been the week before when somebody won the Super Bowl. You already knew who won the Super Bowl, but you still waited for that issue to come out on Thursday. Why? Because there was such a great story, either about the game or the backstory. And I felt that we really had gotten away from that, not Fox 2, but just in general, sports guys. Hey, there's a highlight. Hey, there's a highlight. And instead of really digging in and having fun with a great story, we did a lot more of that. And there were people who we hadn't maybe kept up with. Nafisa Collier is an incredibly talented basketball player, had a great career at UConn. She was playing in the WNBA, and I thought, we should have caught up with her months ago. But we had time during COVID, we did. And then just trying to be as creative as possible. We had Ozzie Smith and Willie McGee together. And if I ask Willie to do the interview, he probably says no. If Ozzie's like, well, what do you want to talk to me? You've interviewed me, Martin, like 20 times, 200 times. But I said, what if you two talk? And it was great. It was on Zoom, but I basically just got out of the way. And they started making fun of each other. And Ozzie's like, he lived in my house, Martin. And I said, that's great. He should. And then Ozzie goes, no. He never left. And Willie lived with him for like a couple of years. And Willie goes, hold on. Would you moved out of Ozzie's town and country home if you were me, a young guy? And I'm like, no. It was the greatest thing because the two of them are laughing and going back and forth. And I just think during COVID, it was a reminder to get back to kind of feature reporting, which day in, day out, a lot of times we get away from.
Finally, Marty, what are you most proud of in your career?
I think being able to work in my hometown and to cover teams that I care about. It sounds so cliche, everybody says the people, but when you get to meet so many different people, and a lot of them are ones, like an Ozzie Smith that I grew up watching. When I was first back in town, to be down at the old Busch Stadium doing live shots, and Jack Buck is just sitting there. We had a live report one time, and I didn't have a guest, and I forget who didn't show. It might have been Walt Jocketty, like had a meeting last minute. I went over, I'm like 30, and I run over to Jack Buck, and I said, can you do this quick hit with me on Fox 2? And he said, who stiffed you? And I said, well, and he said, no, you didn't ask me first, did you? And I had to admit, well, Mr. Jocketty had a meeting. He's like, that's fine. He comes on, of course he's great. They're rapping me in my ear, but I'm like, it's Jack Buck. And he's like, ask Dave Murray, will it rain tonight? And he's like, he just takes over the interview. And I thought, how cool is this? If I'm working in great markets, you know, Chicago, Milwaukee, Denver, wherever, that's not going to happen. That moment, it's just not going to mean the same thing to me. So to be around those kind of people in your hometown, it does count for more.
Hey, Martin, awesome to do this, and thank you so much.
Dan, good to be with you. Good to be friends.
That's Martin Kilcoyne, sports director at Fox 2. This is Scoops with Danny Mac, and we do this every Sunday night at 10:30. And I'll see you next weekend.